Peace, everyone. I hope you are very well. Welcome to the 2025 Year of the Snake DECODE. I am stoked to be presenting this to you. If you wish to take notes, grab your supplies now, get a drink, and get relaxed. This is going to be a trip. If you enjoyed this presentation, please like, share, and subscribe for more videos in the future. We exist within a vast ocean of invisible, universal energy. All of nature, our Earth, planets, sun, and moon, bathe in an infinite sea of subtle substance or ether, the essence of which is the life force, often termed consciousness. Hindu seers thousands of years ago named this energy Sakti, the creative formative energy of the gods. They stated, when manifesting in the physical world, it brings with it the forces of attraction and repulsion, and moves in a curved path or spiral. Throughout India, it has always been symbolized in the form of the hooded serpent or cobra, an ancient Hindu amulet and talisman, sign of the initiate. The border of triangles symbolizes the three universal principles governing the cyclic processes of nature and known as the Trinity, or Law of Three. That is, creation, preservation, and dissolution. The seven knotted bamboo represents the Law of Seven. There exist 7 levels of consciousness to be attained by an initiate. 7 energy centers or chakras distribute vital energy throughout the human biophysical system. 7 stages of growth occur during the life cycle. Light consists of 7 primary colors or light frequencies. The number is highly significant in all esoteric teachings. The serpent is in his aspect symbolic of the universal creative energy or life force manifesting in man as consciousness. Psychologically, 7 relates to the realization of our potentialities, success in our chosen endeavors. Manifesting 7 different frequencies, life energy is directly related to the 7 bands of light that constitute the composition of pure white light, seen by our senses in the form of the rainbow. The term rainbow body is often heard to describe the principle. Characteristics of universal energy. 1. As can be observed in the operation of heat, light, electricity, magnetism, and chemical reactions, yet it is different from all of them. 2. It fills all space, penetrating and permeating everything. Dense materials conduct it better and faster. Metal refracts it, while organic material absorbs it. 3. It is basically synergetic, a synthesis of all the forces in nature. It has a basic negentropic (formative and organizing) effect, even as heat increases, and therefore is the opposite of entropy, which is the disintegration and disorganization of matter set forth by the second law of thermodynamics, which it thereby violates. 4. Changes in the energy precede observable physical changes, and it creates matter, energy, and life. 5. It has its opposite number, which is opposed to its life-giving properties. This occurs during disintegration of matter when life-giving energy is leaving instead of integrating into a system. 6. In any highly organized structure, that is crystals, plants, humans, there are certain points at which the energy is highly concentrated. For example, the human chakras in the yogic tradition and the acupuncture points in the traditional Chinese medical system. 7. The energy will flow from one object to another if a sympathy or attractability exists between them. The density of the energy varies in inverse proportions to the distance, which sets it apart from electromagnetic or gravitational laws, but for which a theory of potentials is applicable. 8. The energy is observable in several ways, as isolated pulsating points, as an aura surrounding a body, as a flame, as a tenuous web, or as a spiral. This information, forming essential elements in both ancient traditions and modern research, was assembled by Lawrence Bainham, an American engineer and researcher in bioelectronics. In nature, Universal energy is known to the yogis as prana, the breath of life. Polynesians know it as mana, or vital force. The Australian Aborigines term it karumba. To the Chinese, it is qi. To Germans, it is wodan. Wilhelm Reich referred to it as organ, and Christians call it Holy Spirit. The Russians label it plasma. To Colin Wilson, it is the X factor. Noetic energy and magnoelectricity are both recent terms formulated by American Charles Musis, Ph.D., well-known investigator, and William A. Tiller, Ph.D., professor of material science. It has as many names as there are civilizations on Earth. The ancients taught of a universe built on invisible causes, the material world being the outer garment, veil or effect of a higher, more subtle order of reality. The physical world, seemingly solid to our senses, when reduced to its ultimate, is mostly emptiness or etheric spaces with almost innumerable particles of negative or positive electricity, mutually acting or interacting, producing all the existing material phenomena and holding them in a more or less organized state. All matter is force, or energy, or light in crystallized form. With the substantial reality of an ether existing in space as accepted by quantum physics, in line with the ancient Vedic teachings, we can now look at the movement of this energy and how it integrates and forms this material world we know according to modern 20th century understanding as well as past views. The entwined serpents which gave birth to the symbol of the medical profession, the caduceus, later became in Greek mythology the staff of Hermes, the messenger of the gods. The two serpents in a double helix around a central rod are known in yogic terms as Ida, related to the moon, the female or negative polarity, magnetic in nature, and the Pingala, or the Pingala, related to the sun, the male or positive polarity, electrical in nature. They represent two of the major nadis, or conduits, through which polarized bioenergy, life force, kundalini, or serpent force, is normally conducted throughout the biophysical system. The 7 chakras, or energy vortex centers, are interconnected, each chakra being responsible for the distribution of life energy received from the environment via the energy body or causal body to a respective organ of the endocrine system. The central rod is known as the sushumna and corresponds to the spinal column. Each serpent or conduit conducts its respective energy to form the human electromagnetic energy flow. It is the maintenance of balance between these two energy flows that underlies the principle of Indian Ayurvedic medicine, acupuncture, and holistic health in general, and in particular, Kundalini Yoga. 2 wings appear at the top of the caduceus. These are representative of the intellectual and intuitive cognitive faculties. When bilaterally balanced, mental and physical well-being is the result. The orb at the top of the rod symbolizes this ideal condition. This is from Wimbaraku and the Myth of Jarapiri by Charles Malford. Sacred wooden boards or tapundas used in Aboriginal ceremonial rites and inscribed with the serpent motif show the spiraling vortex configurations which indicate high telluric energy points along the serpent current. The tapunda shows a double helix pattern appearing similar to the designs of the caduceus or the staff of Hermes, which is associated with the medical profession and of ancient Indian origin. The Wandjina images in the cult of the rainbow serpent are so closely aligned to Indian serpent worship that the probability of cultural interchange in some remote age is no longer a vague theory. In its lower aspect, the rainbow serpent forms the central figure in many of the great Aboriginal fertility cults, such as Unapipi. Unapipi represents the Earth Mother, and the cult is probably the most important and widely spread of any in northern Australia. Medicine men, tribal initiates or clever men, are also closely connected to the snake. Thus, in its higher aspect, it relates to wisdom and enlightenment. This dual role attributed to serpents or their image as symbols of the life force and therefore consciousness is universal and indicates how life force energy can be used for regenerative ends or sublimated towards purely mental or ascetic pursuits. In Greek mythology, the serpent, he who sees and waits, was associated with Asclepius, the physician and healer and son of Apollo. Shrines and temples of healing known as Asclepia were built throughout Greece along the shores of the Aegean. Here, the sick would come to worship and seek for cures. The most renowned was the sanctuary of Asclepius at Epidaurus, which flourished from 600 BC to AD 400. At its peak, the cult of Asclepius was the most successful in history in that part of the world to fuse religion, magic, nature care, diet, rest, massage, and hydrotherapy into the service of healing. You can see today in different organizations the symbolism still used modern day, and I won't attract any extra attention, but there's the WHO organization and the Star of Life, which is very common in the hospital systems today. The word Naga means wise serpent, the title given long ago to those who had acquired great wisdom. The female counterpart is Nagini. They worship the sun as the giver of life and heat, creator of night and day, and the responsible agent for vegetation and fertility. They became the instructors of the Brahmins and were the progenitors of sun worship itself. The hooded serpent was their totem. The caduceus, which forms the emblem of the profession, was in all probability first identified with Takshaka. The coiled serpent, or serpents, around the central rod is a Naga emblem. It was in Kashmir that Apollonius of Tyana, a Pythagorean philosopher, became instructed by the Nagas and completed his initiation into the mysteries. As mentioned earlier, Caduceus later became the staff of Hermes, Greek mythos messenger of the gods, Mercury, two serpents, the double helix around the central rod being the Ida, the moon, the female or negative polarity, which is magnetic in nature, and the Pingala, which is the sun, male or positive polarity, and the electrical force in nature. The Ida and Pingala representing two of the major nadis or conduits through which polarized bioenergy, the life force, kundalini or serpent force, is normally conducted throughout the biophysical system. The 7 chakras or energy vortex centers are interconnected, each chakra being responsible for the distribution of life energy received from the environment via the energy body or causal body to a respective organ of the endocrine system. The sign of the serpent is derived from the spiraling motion of all energy beginning with the primal formative process which spawned our galaxy and solar system, as seen in the configuration of a spiral nebula and reflected in the formation of seashells and flowers, in the nature of the flow of energy in an electrical current, in the human body, and in the double helix of the DNA molecule, the transmitter of genetic information throughout the physical entity. As the forces of attraction and repulsion come into play, as spirit begins its involution into matter. Universal energy is a consequence of this interplay of forces, what science labels electromagnetism and gravity, but is still unable to explain in materialistic terms, and merely effects of the movement of this dynamic yet subtle universal energy which pervades all of space, all of the created universe. The slide presented here is credited to Michael Heikkinen. This is explaining his model of where spin comes from in the universe. The magnetic poles of a body are basically the touchdown points of the current, which can have a tendency to wander due to influences both external and internal to the body, just as our own poles on Earth do. It should also be noted that the magnetic poles need not necessarily correspond with the center of the body's rotational axis. While this seems to be less common, our own planet Uranus spins almost perpendicular to its poles. Once spin has been imparted to an object, the gyroscopic force tends to keep it spinning in its original orientation, and it's not easily altered. But where does spin come from? Make a thumbs up with your right hand. A current flowing in the direction your thumb points will create magnetic fields that cause motion in the direction your fingers point. Current flowing up has a counterclockwise rotational force, and current flowing down has a clockwise force. The current flow itself also causes a forward motion in the direction of your thumb. These two combined result in a helical motion, and vortex math will apply as you move toward an actual pinch point. Similar to the electric double layers that we have seen gravity exhibit throughout this series, the structure of a current flow's magnetic fields is also made up of double layers, and these layers are current flowing in opposite directions. Looking down these tubes, we would see a structure similar to the green circles I have been using as a cross-section of gravity. So in this image, the current is not exactly just incoming, it's going both ways with a net flow in one direction through the object. The rotational forces from this net flow will spin up the object at the center exactly like a homopolar motor, which is essentially what a galaxy actually is. Thanks, Neil Thompson. This is where spin comes from. The images on the outside of this frame is a sketch from Winbaraku and the myth of Jarapiri, showing formation of a rainbow serpent current. The path of the rainbow serpent current, the telluric current. In its true context, the creation of the landscape by the Wangina refers to the activities surrounding the nourishing of the energy centers along the existing serpent current. This natural science of geomancy, still practiced in the East, is almost forgotten or ignored by Western materialistic science. Little wonder that we do not understand the basic ingredients of Aboriginal culture in Australia. Our education teaches us nothing about these workings of nature or how we interrelate with them. The spiral is a principle basic to nature's processes. Tendrils wind around a support. Leaves are coiled in spiral form before they open. Flowers form in a spiral nature. The spiraling formation of shells is one of the most obvious examples. In the body, the spiral is found in the umbilical cord, the sweat glands, the humerus, the pelvis, and thumbprints. In cell division, the spiral appears, as well as in the DNA molecule in the cell nucleus. The spiral possesses a subtle quality of its own. Wilhelm Reich observed that life began on Earth from its action, thus echoing the Hindu insight, and in the heavens vast streams of orgone, or ether, flow, pulsating in spiral form and creating, through superimposition. The doctrine of vibration, relative to the philosophy of Kashmir Savaism, relates that the cosmic vortices, known as the wheel of energies or Sakti chakras, follow one another in recurrent cycles. As each wheel rotates, one power after another becomes active, taking over from the one that went before it and blending it into the one that follows. The energetic flow circulates in harmony with the rhythm of its pulsation. The law of vortical movement in primordial matter is one of the oldest conceptions of Greek philosophers, whose great minds were all nourished by the arcane Vedic wisdom and taken up 2,000 years later by Copernicus, Galileo, DECODE, and Swedenborg. Yogic masters have described the movement of pre-physical matter as circulatory, and Democritus, Greek philosopher of the late 5th century BC and a pupil of the Esoteric school, taught that this gyratory movement of the atoms and spheres existed from eternity. Pythagoras and his pupils in the 6th century BC taught of the rotation of the earth, and Archimedes calculated its rotations in the 2nd century BC as scientifically as modern astronomers do now. 3 heads represent the law of 3, relative to most esoteric teachings and ancient philosophies throughout the world. These 3 laws or principles relate to creation, preservation, or sustenance, and dissolution or destruction, which repeat themselves in a cycle and apply to all existing phenomena. The gods who govern these principles are named Brahma, the creator, Vishnu, the preserver or sustainer, and Siva, the destroyer, and form the Trinity, or in Hinduism, Trimurti. In the physical sense, birth, survival, and death are irrefutable realities of existence. The ancient Egyptian trinity was named Osiris, Isis, Horus, and in the Christian faith, Father, Mother, Holy Ghost, Son, Jesus of Nazareth being the destroyer of ignorance. In the psychological sense, creation of any sort can occur only in the face of commensurate opposition, and a balance or reconciliation must be established between the two forces in order that the idea may become an actuality and be sustained. For example, male and female is not a relationship. There must exist love or desire to actualize and sustain the relationship. A composer and a sheet of musical manuscript will not produce a musical score. There must be inspiration. A business deal cannot be closed without a mutual agreement. In physics, the three principles become transposed in the concept of proton, neutron, electron, forces constituting the nature of every atom in existence. Psychologically, the male-female union as a result of the law of three is, by nature, extended to include additional considerations which become more complex as the functioning of the relationship changes. The original love or desire, emotion, etc. is sublimated towards a more balanced ideology which embraces family, security, ambition, and the future realization of each partner's potentialities. Legend has it that the eyes or spectacles on the rear of the cobra's hood were given to it by Gautama the Buddha as protection against the attacks of Garuda the eagle, archenemy of the cobras. Garuda is the steed or vehicle of the god Vishnu, the preserver in the Hindu trinity. High-flying birds represent spirituality. It is believed in India, as in most ancient civilizations, the process of spiritual evolution in its pure natural form demands a series of rebirths through reincarnation. Vishnu is the preserver of this principle, which in the popular sense would be, let nature take its course, to preserve a natural balance. The tree of life is a fitting analogy. Siva, the Serpent King, patron of the yogis, possessor of the ultimate wisdom on the earthly or material plane, insists that spiritual evolution through illumination can occur in a single lifetime, thus eliminating a succession of rebirths. His devotion is to destruction of ignorance. His credo is hastened evolution, or in popular terms, nature must be given a helping hand. The tree of knowledge is the appropriate analogy. Garuda's counterpart in Egypt was the vulture. The headpiece of the Egyptian pharaohs, the diadem, was adorned with the cobra or uraeus on the left side and the vulture on the right. Politically, the diadem was symbolic of the union of Upper and Lower Egypt. Metaphysically, however, the images correspond to the association of the serpent with wisdom and the intellect, and the vulture with intuition and assimilation, the respective functions of the brain. The union of both right and left hemispheres in bilateral symmetry results, ideally, in the perfect man, the enlightened one. As all pharaohs were held to be, the diadem was modeled on the anatomical structure of the human brain. Enlightenment, however, is fraught with the constant struggle between discrimination, rationalization, and logic on one hand, and the clearer, more direct insight of the intuitive vision on the other. Meditative techniques were designed to eliminate this struggle, to overcome the duality, and to promote a more balanced mental condition. Physical evolution is concomitant with the evolution of an entity's consciousness. Any change in consciousness is accompanied by a corresponding change in the biophysical system. Human individuality is inescapably accompanied by a duality in thinking. The mind always compares, which is antagonistic to the realization of unity or the interrelationship between all objects, which are merely the diverse physical aspects of one universal creative principle. To consolidate this equivocal condition and to realize unity, one approach, and perhaps the most positive in our present time-oriented society, is to help bring about a knowledgeable understanding of the universal principles underlying such sublime examples of art and architecture as those created by India and Egypt in distant ages. Split brain research has indicated, particularly the Western mind, has achieved over 2,000 to 2,500 years a disproportionate development of the intellectual left hemisphere, which sees only the parts as logical, analytical processes, not the whole. The intuitive pattern-forming, or right hemisphere, has taken backseat to favor of the rationalizing logical methods of assessing reality. In other words, imbalance of the left and right processing fields of the brain in the biophysical system. As aforementioned, any change in consciousness is accompanied by a corresponding change in the biophysical system. All universal energy forces interweaving chaos and order, with interpenetrating systems working to achieve equilibrium, or well-being. When we become attuned to vibrate in harmony, or cohere with the frequencies of such sublime structures or works of art, our consciousness must respond. The deepest intuitive processes are activated, and information of a higher, more aesthetic order is admitted to our physical receptors. Feelings of peace, well-being, and even ecstasy become possible. Metaphysically, the winged cobra is representative of the transcendental nature of higher consciousness or total spiritual enlightenment, and as such the image adorned the entrance to all sacred temples and schools of initiation in Egypt. That Egypt, for one, possessed this knowledge is incontestable in the face of the harmonic proportions of her art and architecture. Alexander Badawi writes, in Ancient Egyptian Architectural Design, "It is apparent that Egyptian architecture was designed according to a harmonic system based upon the use of squares and triangles, and there is also sufficient evidence about the occurrence of the numbers from the Fibonacci series in the significant measures in cubits and plans of the monuments. The fact that both the 8 to 5 triangle allied with the square and the Fibonacci series give a good approximation of the golden section provides that the Egyptians became aware of the qualities of that ratio at least as early as the 3rd dynasty. The arithmetic of Fibonacci on the graphic and the graphic system of the golden ratio were combined to achieve harmonic design in architecture according to rules capable of being transmitted by teaching without the help of writing." End quote. The concept is not the product of mathematical imagination. The principles of equilibrium and its use in the temples of Egypt and India and in the Gothic cathedrals acted in reality not only as a book revealing a higher knowledge which the intellect by itself is incapable of comprehending, but a vital link between man and the cosmos. The idea of gods as metaphors for the principles underlying the forces of nature was central to the abstract nature of the Indian mind and imbued their philosophy and mythology with the lyricism and beauty foreign to our 20th century sensibilities. The inference to the serpent representing universal energy is clearly presented in the following extract from the Atharva Veda. "Homage to the snakes which ever move around the earth, and are in the sky and in heaven. Homage to the snakes which are in the arrows of magicians, and of tree spirits, and which lie in holes. Homage to those snakes which are in the brightness of heaven, which are in the rays of the sun, which have made their abode in the waters." Once again, it is made obvious that the nature of the living cell is a mirror image of the principles which control its host, the micro reflecting the macro, as above, so below. It was neither by accident nor ignorance that the ancients symbolized the double helix, applicable to all realms of creation, in the form of 2 coiled cobras, and that the Egyptians and the Greeks, echoing the Hindus, associated the image with the Thoth Hermes, the messenger of the gods. The ancient civilizations were obviously well aware of the importance of aesthetics in society. Remnants of their civilizations speak of that fact through the countless artistic treasures and architectural masterpieces scattered across the face of the planet. If we attract that which is of an aesthetic nature, our being is elevated and wisdom through beauty becomes an applicable wisdom. Conversely, if we attract negativity, that state becomes our reality. A fundamental harmonic proportion found throughout nature gave spiritual as well as aesthetic significance to the structures and artistic expressions of those times. The knowledge was embedded, for example, in the temples of Luxor and Karnak, at the Great Pyramids of Giza, in the majestic temples of India, in the Parthenon of Athens, the Gothic cathedrals of Europe, and in the creations of the Renaissance period. In the living world, it is seen in the spirals of plants, seashells, and in the DNA macromolecule. It is relative to the configuration of a spiral nebula, as well as in the formation of the planetary system. The pattern is known as the golden ratio, symbolized mathematically as phi, 1618, and is a proportion integral to life itself. Plato regarded it as a key to the physics of the cosmos. Creative physics, as earlier stated, sees this key as being amenable to a nature's impulses and therefore not fixed. Gravity, as an attribute of the Akashic realm, has been known for millennia in the Eastern schools of wisdom as the instrument by which all phenomena are regulated and assisted toward a state of symmetry, harmony, and balance. The resulting tension and compression on atomic particles accompanying this natural process gives rise to the gravitational effect, which can be viewed as a motion towards order, just as the human mind orders and stabilizes the functioning of the biophysical system. And it is in the area of biophysics that gravity, in relation to attraction and repulsion, is being better understood, as its essential nature is more readily observed. The properties, however, of gravitational forces apply universally. A human being consists of only that which exists in the whole, the universe, or else we must be faced with the incongruous absurdity that a minute speck of the cosmic totality consists of something that the universe lacks, which is impossible. What is termed gravity today, and held to be one of the four known forces in the universe along with electromagnetism, weak and strong nuclear forces, is in reality not a primary independent force, but closely allied to the forces of attraction and repulsion, which, due to their interaction, give rise to the phenomenal world. Some of the known properties of gravitational fields are as follows. 1. They can be directed and focused. 2. They can carry information. 3. They are able to convert the energy of a field into matter with weight. 4. They can be positive or negative and cause attraction and repulsion, respectively. 5. They can undergo transition into any form of field and energy. 6. They are closely bound up with change of symmetry groups and with distortion of space at the submolecular level of biological structures. We attract according to our being is an ancient Hindu aphorism, meaning that all things are drawn to their like and converge with natures congenial to themselves, equally applicable at atomic, molecular, cellular, physical, universal, or cosmic level. The action produces and preserves universal harmony. In Genesis, the serpent tempted Eve to taste the fruit from the tree of knowledge, driving her and Adam forever out of paradise. Interestingly, the Gnostic Christians held a different view of the serpent. The Gnostics believed in direct contact with the divine without need for an intercessory. Thus, they were not particularly popular with the Church of Rome. To the Gnostics, the serpent was a hero, not a villain. By persuading Eve to partake of the fruit of knowledge, the serpent led mankind to the path of spiritual autonomy. This requires man to leave paradise where all his or her needs are met, but at the cost of subservience and unconsciousness. The quest for understanding that the Serpent of Eden symbolically represents is attained by leaving the blessed ignorance of unconsciousness for the hard-won fruit of increased awareness. Universal and human consciousness are one and the same in nature, the only difference being that individual consciousness is experienced as limited or restricted in its operation within its physical vehicle. The activity of the mind is that of consciousness itself, as are feelings, thoughts, emotions, intuition, creativity, and imagination. Consciousness exhibits many faces, which are in reality only categorizations conceived by our intellect. The integrative and disintegrative forces operating throughout the universe are encompassed within the principle of one universal consciousness expressing itself and through every density of matter from a subtle invisible to the gross physical. The cosmos is viewed as a living organism with a desire for expression being equally valid as human desire. Human nature is thus seen as a reflection of universal nature. How can we possess that which does not already exist? In China and Tibet, the dragon is but a transposition of the serpent. The Chinese writers usually refer to the Nagas under that name and the character of the dragon, as it appears in the folklore and literature of China and Tibet, is in great part derived from the Indian conception of the Naga. As the dragon, signifying the being who excels in intelligence, breathes fire, the destructive action of snake venom resembles that of the all-devouring fire, and the snake belongs to those beings which are believed to possess to a high degree that magical energy which is indicated by the Sanskrit word tajas, meaning heat or fire. Nagarjuna, the Indian adept who became a Buddhist in the 2nd century BC, was the one who converted China to Buddhism. Quetzalcoatl, the Mexican plumed serpent god, instructor of the populace, came accompanied by builders, painters, astronomers, etc. He built roads, civilized the people, and departed across the sea on a magic raft of serpents. Mexican tribes associated with the myth of the plumed serpent came from a city called Tulan. It is significant that they were known as Tarianas, a title closely resembling that given to the tribes of Turania in Turkestan, who were associated with the serpent, the Tarians. The Mayas, Aztecs, and Toltecs attributed the source of all light, spiritual and mental, to the great serpent, in keeping with the Christian Bible, where knowledge, due to the serpent, was obtained. Humboldt, the German naturalist and explorer, states, quote, "The hieroglyphs, cosmological monuments, and institutions of the peoples of Central and South America prove indisputably the existence of communication between America and India." In Hinduism, the cosmic serpent, Anantasesha, symbolic of timeless eternity, carries the world on his thousandfold hood as he rests between creative periods. The Hindus believe that the universe is periodically created and dissolved. As the creative impulse stirs within the great serpent in the sky, when passive idea becomes active thought, the forces of attraction and repulsion come into play as spirit begins its involution into matter. Universal energy is a consequence of this interplay of forces, what science labels electromagnetism and gravity, but is still unable to explain in materialistic terms, are merely effects of the movement of this dynamic yet subtle universal energy which pervades all of space, all of the created universe. The hooded cobra, depicted in a coiled or undulating position, is symbolic of the spiraling, vortex-like pattern of movement of universal energy as it permeates matter and proceeds to nourish and vivify it. It is also symbolic of the essential nature of that life force energy which is identified as pure consciousness. Hindu seers named the energy Sakti, the all-pervading formative energy of the gods. Each god, or governor of the forces of nature, has his own Sakti, or consort, which is understood as the expression of the god. Sakti is thus female or feminine, a life-giving, nurturing, non-aggressive, loving force, and if Western science is ever able to grasp the fact that human consciousness is an attribute of that same energy and not the result of physical, biochemical reactions, it could dispel the ever-increasing aggression, personal greed, and psychosis that is pervading our present society like a cancer. With millions upon millions of dollars being spent on the investigation of subatomic particle interactions, a great many of those particles being the creations of the physicist's own consciousness, one should question the viability and ethics of such research. The Hindus have clearly outlined the nature of this energy field and have shouted about it for millennia. In the advanced West, the tones were unintelligible to those who guarded the gates of materialism. They did not wish to hear the language of love. Form, growth, development, and behavioral patterns and variations in nature are all governed by patterns of information projected from the higher realms via the dynamic universal field. These patterns undergo a final four-stage process of induction into the physical realm to finally form a compound of all forces and energies in all domains. We experience this phenomenon as the material world through our senses, and continually recycle information back via the universal field, a two-way feedback process. Form, growth, development, and behavioral patterns are ultimately expressed in atomic structure, or more correctly atomic motion, as atoms are dynamic entities. At the manifested or electromagnetic level, a geometry applies for the process and mathematically determinable equations become available. These geometries and mathematics accord with nature's habitual activity and requirements, and therefore do not conform to a strict Platonic or Pythagorean view which saw fixed laws of operation throughout the universe. Nature, being creative and evolutionary, does not require adherence to immutable, changeless laws. The geometries are not of divine decree, but rather the products of universal memory and intelligence, concomitant with the Akashic domain. Just as human creativity is variable in its expression even when an idea is repeated, so does nature reserve that privilege. As Socrates once said, all learning is recollection. Peace, everyone. I hope you enjoyed this presentation of the Year of the Snake DECODE. If so, please like, share, and subscribe. This will significantly help grow the channel, and it means the world, so thank you again. Here, I have some music available on all streaming platforms if you like instrumentals, so there's that. And I also have a book available I recently published, and another book that I'm finishing up revisions on to follow up with the first. All of the links will be in the description below if you are interested. I also have a free consciousness expansion course in the same YouTube channel, so feel free to check that out. It will elaborate on the recent publication Peaks and Valleys. Once again, everybody, thanks for being here, and thanks for being you. Please take care in your endeavors. Much love. Peace.